Welcome back to Wild Scientist, where we break down the latest news in paleoanthropology. I'm your host, Rachel. Put on your hiking boots and grab a sun hat because today we're going to present-day Nafud Desert, Saudi Arabia.
Wild Scientist.
So let's get into it. The story starts in September of 2020. Stewart and colleagues' journal article, Human Footprints Provide Snapshot of Last Interglacial Ecology in the Arabian Interior, was published with evidence supporting their claim that a series of footprints found in a lake deposit confirm at least some humans had traversed the area. The lake deposit is located in present-day Nafud Desert, Saudi Arabia. These footprints are now the oldest that document Homo sapiens in the fossil record of the Arabian Peninsula, meaning humans were actually in the area earlier than had been thought. So let's take a second here to dissect something. The footprints we're looking at aren't actually fossils, but luckily there's still some pretty amazing things we can learn from what is present here. A mold fossil. A mold fossil is a remnant of the past that actually isn't part of a once living organism, but is an imprint left by an organism that itself became solidified. In this case, someone walked across this shallow lake, and their footprint left a mold long enough for the ground around it to solidify. How do we know how long ago this was? The researchers, remember Stewart and colleagues, collected samples of solidified rock from the base layer of the mold fossil and the top layer. Using OSL dating, a technique that estimates the time since a sample was exposed to sunlight, they dated the two samples of rock, giving us a range of dates that the footprint could have been created in. Our specimen took a walk through here any time between 112 and 121,000 years ago. But with such a wide range, what does this actually tell us? The out of Africa hypothesis is written about and supported by many authors in a variety of fields. It hypothesizes two things: Homo sapiens originated in Africa, and the date that Homo sapiens first began to migrate out of Africa. In his 2006 article in Science magazine, Paul Mellers concludes, with the support of other authors, that Homo sapien migration into Asia and Indonesia occurred between 55 and 65,000 years ago. Remember when our humans stepped foot in that lake? At least 112,000 years ago. And that's a huge leap. Now, I'm not hiding the facts from you. Stewart and colleagues say that humans were expected to be in the Arabian Peninsula by 85,000 years ago, much earlier than Mellers could tell in 2006. So we're making progress. This 85,000 years ago comes from Groka and colleagues in 2018, who found this date by dating a large selection of stone tools found across the Arabian Peninsula. Groka and colleagues also allude that paleoanthropologists are approaching a breaking point with new information, and that theories and hypotheses and dates are frequently needing to be adjusted right now. So that's a lot of information. But to recap, year 2006, Mellers gives us 65,000 years ago at most. Year 2018, Groka and colleagues settle for at least 85,000 years ago. Finally, new discovery, year 2020, Stewart and his team back us all the way up to a maximum of 121,000 years ago. And back to the out of Africa hypothesis, Stewart and colleagues' big discovery does two things. It, once again, readjusts the date on the hypothesis, which means, number two, it supports the hypothesis and strengthens it with up-to-date figures. And there you have it. Anatomically modern humans started migrating out of Africa about 30,000 years earlier than evidence previously supported. But Stewart's second claim gets a little sticky here to me. I'll give it to you in their words. The tracks are scattered across the Paleo Lake and oriented in various directions, indicating that they were not simply traversing the lake, but were engaged in non-directional activities. And they go on, it may have served as a stopping point and place to drink and forage during long-distance travel, perhaps initiated by the arrival of dry conditions or dwindling water resources. Now, if I'm the expert in breaking down this article for our listeners, this doesn't really check out to me. Luckily, I know an expert in something else. So I brought in Jake Bright, a pre-law student. Hi, Jake.
Hi.
Do you have any experience in biological anthropology?
No, I've got none.
All right, but you did the favor of reading this article for me on 112,000-year-old footprints, so thank you.
Problem.
Listeners might be confused about why I'm asking a pre-law student to examine these claims with me. Could you explain what exactly being a pre-law student makes you an expert in and why I asked you to join me today?
Yeah, sure. Being a pre-law student gives you experience with pretty much one thing, which is the basic ways to construct and strengthen or weaken an argument. And that sort of argument creation theory is helpful in this sort of dissection.
Okay, cool. So let's look at Stewart's article with that. They say that humans didn't regularly visit this lake for a daily source of potable water, for example, but rather that they were transient visitors, possibly migrating somewhere else. In this conclusion of transiency, there is evidence and conclusion, but no real analysis. Did you see the same thing?
Yeah. I mean, it sort of is strange because they do present evidence, but they don't connect it to the conclusion. Like they had all the pieces there, and then they stopped before they made it all the way. You need to. The basic structure of an argument is that you present your evidence and then elaborate on why that drives it home to whatever your conclusion is. So yeah, no, I'm seeing that as well.
Okay, and your side of the logic makes sense to me as well. So we agree they didn't falsify information, of course, but it does kind of feel like they presented a little too much of a conclusion based on too little of evidence, you know? So
Yeah.
so how do we feel about this? It kind of feels to me like we're left with some answers in the beginning, but then more questions at the end. Is it bad to conclude a study with more questions than answers?
Not if that's your goal, but I'm not sure that that was the goal of these authors. You know, you want if you're going on like a fact-finding mission, then what you should present at the end is a fact. But if you're just exploring a topic, then sure, presenting questions at the end is no problem. But I don't know if that's what they were trying to do here.
Yeah, you're right. And that kind of reminds me of the whole scientific method in the beginning of all of this, that what we're trying to do every time is narrow down the closest we can get to a definite answer, right?
Yeah, I mean that's the constant goal of science and most fields in general. You might even argue is to hopefully whittle it down until you have a very airtight, concrete answer. But that's especially true for science. Yeah.
For sure, yeah. What a cool idea to leave this episode with, honestly. But thanks for joining me today, Jake.
No problem.
And thanks again to our listeners for joining us once again on Wild Scientist for another interesting piece of paleoanthropology news. I know you learned something new today. See you next time, right back here on Wild Scientist.